Your story matters too, just like mine. On my 30th birthday, I came home with a $20 cake and walked into an ambush. No celebration, just a cold dinner and my dad telling me I had until morning to leave. After years of paying their bills, covering their debts being their safety net, I was suddenly a burden. So I packed my bags and froze every credit card tied to my name. Hi, I'm Delaney, the daughter they called ungrateful after living off me for a decade. What happened next? Let's just say the lights didn't stay on for long. Have you ever been pushed aside by the very people you held up? Tell me, what would you have done if your parents kicked you out on your birthday? I parked 2 houses down. It wasn't intentional, just muscle memory. I'd done it so often, giving Roy space in the driveway, never blocking Janice's view of the mailbox, that it felt automatic. The sun was already low October dusk, settling over Mason like a soft blanket with too many holes. I grabbed the cake from the passenger seat, balanced the flimsy box in one hand, and braced myself. The porch light flickered above me, buzzing like it always did when the bulb was on its last leg. I paused, listening to the faint sounds of the TV through the window. Some sitcom laugh track droned on behind closed curtains. My fingers tightened around the plastic handle of the bakery box. The cake wasn't much vanilla red icing, one candle missing because the cashier was too distracted to notice. I didn't have the heart to point it out. Inside the house smelled like meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Not homemade boxed, probably microwaved. Roy was already at the table, knife and fork in hand, chewing like the food offended him. Janice sat opposite, eyes focused on her plate like it might offer a way out. No one looked up. "You're late," Roy said, not turning his head. I set the cake on the counter, letting the crinkling bag fill the room. "Worked late. Had some things to finish." He grunted. Janice didn't speak. I shrugged off my coat, hung it on the same wobbly hook that had leaned left since 2012, and took my seat at the far end of the table. We ate in silence, if you could call it that. Forks, scraped glasses clinked. The furnace rumbled to life. No one said happy birthday. No candle, no card. Just overcooked green beans and the sound of meatloaf being chewed like a chore. Halfway through the meal, Roy dropped his fork with a clatter. The sound cut clean through me. "You're too old to be freeloading," he said flatly. I blinked, then looked at Janice. She didn't meet my eyes. "I pay the internet bill," I said slowly. "The electricity, half the mortgage, groceries." Roy chuckled a single dry bark. "Paying a few bills doesn't buy you a lifetime stay, princess." Princess. The word hit harder than I expected. He used to call me that when I scraped my knees or brought home hand turkey drawings from school. Now it sounded like an insult worn smooth from overuse. "I wasn't asking for forever," I replied, voice steady. He leaned back in his chair like a judge issuing a sentence. "It's time you stood on your own. You've had plenty of time." Still, Janice said nothing. Her fork paused once, then resumed its silent dance across the plate. She didn't even glance up. There was a weight in my chest, not like sadness or even anger, just something heavy like wet denim after a storm. But I didn't argue. No tears, no raised voice. That would have made it easier for them. Instead, I stood, took one last look at the table, and walked upstairs. My room smelled faintly of vanilla body spray and dust. The cake box sagged in my grip as I set it on the nightstand. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at it. The red icing had smudged against the plastic. The writing looked clumsy. "Happy birthday, Delaney." The D half smeared. I didn't mean to knock it over. One small nudge and it slid off the table, landing with a dull, padded thud. The cardboard bent inward. The frosting clung to the carpet. One candle missing. Fitting. I stared at the mess, waiting for a wave of regret or maybe anger, but nothing came. Just that same soaked-through heaviness. I didn't pick it up. Instead, I opened my laptop. The screen cast a cool glow across the room. My fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before logging in. Electric. Gas. Water. Internet. Each tab opened like muscle memory. Years of managing their household made the process quick, efficient, familiar. If they wanted me gone, I whispered, "I'll go," but not quietly. They said I didn't contribute, so I opened the billing history. The screen lit up with soft blue light, casting long shadows on the wall. The glow felt sterile, like a hospital room at midnight. Below me, the television still hummed a commercial, maybe a sitcom rerun. They were down there, sipping soda, chewing ice, pretending everything was normal. I opened the electric company portal first. Username my email. Password the same I'd used since sophomore year. Janice once called me the organized one. It was said half-jokingly, the way parents sometimes try to praise without noticing the weight beneath their words. But tonight, my orderliness wasn't a quirk. It was a shield, a quiet, steel-plated defense. The electric bill popped up. Last payment me. Auto-drafted. I hovered over the cancel option, my finger pausing for just a breath. Then I clicked. A small window asked, "Are you sure you want to cancel this service?" I didn't blink. Confirm. I moved to the water account, then gas, then internet. Same routine, same indifference from the sites, no questions about loyalty or emotion, just clicks and checkboxes. By the fourth cancellation, my heartbeat slowed. Not in peace, but in precision. Each action was deliberate, measured, clinical. I reached for the yellow legal pad I kept tucked in my nightstand. It was the same one I'd used for grocery lists, home repair plans, the occasional weekend schedule, when I still believed family meant shared effort. I started writing in block letters: electric, canceled; water chem, cancelled; gas, cancelled; internet, cancelled. The ink smudged slightly where my hand pressed too hard. I shifted, adjusting the lamp to dimmer. My body ached, not from effort, but from years of holding myself up in a house built on expectations and thin apologies. Next, the bank. Joint savings for emergencies, Janice had said. And Roy? He never acknowledged it existed yet, had no issue using the card whenever the truck needed brakes or the oven shorted out. I logged in, tapped through layers of security questions. I'd answered for them more times than I could count. Mother's maiden name, first pet's name, street I grew up on. The balance blinked back at me. Not much, just under $5,000. I'd added most of it. Quiet deposits from freelance contracts and late-night shifts. I transferred the full amount into my private account, then shut down the joint one entirely. My phone buzzed. A text from Eli. Eli, Dad's freaking out. Mom's crying. You good? I stared at the screen, lips pressed tight. Eli had always been more observant than he let on. I tapped back quickly. Me, doing what I should have done years ago. Then came the insurance. Their cars were on my plan. Always had been since my first job came with a fleet discount. I clicked through the policy site and selected Remove Vehicle twice. Roy's truck, Janice's dented sedan, another confirmation screen, another pair of clicks, another invisible thread snipped. I went back to my pad. Joint account. Closed. Vehicles. Removed. My handwriting grew steadier with each line. I paused for the first time in an hour, stretching my fingers. The room felt heavier somehow, not because it was full, but because it was mine. My decisions, my space, my air to breathe. There wasn't anger in me, not really. Just finality. I turned to my laptop again. Subscriptions. Netflix, Hulu, their Amazon Prime gone. I didn't even need to check who used them most. I remembered Roy streaming every Sunday game, Janice ordering vitamins and garden gloves and hair dye. I clicked and clicked and clicked. Each cancellation came with a strange lightness, like peeling off a soaked jacket after walking through a storm. Not dry yet, but getting there. My phone buzzed again. This time Maya. Maya. You packed? I smiled, the first genuine one that night. Me, almost, out before sunrise. I closed the laptop gently, as if sealing something shut. The legal pad lay next to it, yellow as ever, full of dark ink and quiet choices. I wasn't making a scene. I wasn't storming out. I was retreating with precision. I was finally choosing me. 17 missed calls. Not one asked if I was okay. The screen glared at me from the nightstand, a list of names I used to associate with holidays, potlucks, childhood. Now they were just noise. Roy, Janice, Aunt Marcy. Unknown numbers, probably cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. I let the phone buzz again, then flipped it face down on the blanket. Morning light filtered in through Maya's sheer curtains, painting soft lines across the walls. The scent of fresh coffee floated in from the kitchen. Somewhere under that, the faint mustiness of old carpet and warm air vents oddly comforting. Maya didn't say much when I woke up. She handed me a chipped mug and went back to folding laundry. She knew better than to ask. I pulled my knees to my chest on the small love seat and tapped through the voicemails. Janice's voice came first, low and cracking. "Delaney? Honey, please call me. There's been a misunderstanding. We never meant to hurt you. Your dad? He's not well. You know how he gets. Just, please come home. We can fix this. Next, Roy. You think you're clever? Think pulling the plug on a few bills makes you an adult. You'll come crawling back once the real world hits you in the face." Then another one also from Roy later that night. "Don't bother calling. Door's locked." My thumb hovered over the delete button. I didn't press it yet. Then came the message from Aunt Marcy. Sweet, syrupy, the kind of voice that makes you feel like a child again, even while it cuts. "Delaney, sweetheart. This is breaking your mother. She hasn't eaten. She's barely sleeping. She keeps asking what she did wrong. Families fight, but we don't abandon each other. Call her. Please." I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. Then Eli's text arrived. "Eli, Dad just told Mom to fake chest pains if guilt doesn't work. Just so you know." I stared at those words for a long time. They didn't even sting. They clarified. Maya brought over a folded blanket, sat beside me. She didn't touch me, didn't say anything immediately. Just handed me a granola bar like it was medicine. I took it and peeled it open slowly. "You look like you just walked out of a war zone," she said softly. "Feels like I'm still in it," I answered. "I know." We sat in silence. I took a sip of coffee, too bitter but honest. "I stayed home for a week when Janice got sick," I said. "Didn't ask for anything. Roy told everyone it was his idea, said he made sure I was there. Like it was a gift I should be thankful for." Maya didn't say a word. She didn't have to. I opened the photo app on my phone. Years of memories stared back, some warm, some hollow. Janice's birthday dinner the year I paid for the restaurant, and they didn't even offer me a slice of cake. Roy's truck repairs, bank transfers to cover late mortgage fees. I scrolled faster. Halloween costumes I made from scratch for neighborhood kids. Groceries bought after long work weeks. Christmas lights I hung while they napped. I had patched holes in their lives for so long I stopped noticing I was unraveling. Now all I saw was the imbalance. I opened my contacts list. It felt colder than I expected, like peering into a room I used to live in now, filled with strangers. Roy, Janice, Marcy, Uncle Phil. 3 cousins. The neighbor Janice liked to gossip with. One by one, I hit delete. Not just remove block. My finger didn't tremble. The last contact left was Maya. I set the phone down. The room felt still, not empty. Still. "They taught me to stay silent," I said aloud, voice barely above a whisper. Maya looked up. I smiled faintly, the kind that hurts behind your eyes. I finally learned that silence can also be a door closing behind me. She didn't answer. She just poured me another cup of coffee and sat closer, not touching, just near. And in that moment, I felt something shift, not loud, not explosive, but steady. I wasn't just leaving anymore. I was letting go. The phone buzzed before I even got to the coffee. Again, then 3 times in a row. I didn't need to check to know something was spiraling. Gray light filtered through the windows, washing Maya's apartment in a dull silver glow. It was the kind of Ohio morning where the sky never really wakes up, just hangs heavy like a damp sweatshirt you can't shrug off. I was halfway through slicing an apple when Maya walked in, eyes still puffy from sleep. She held up her phone before I could say anything. "You seen this? I didn't need to." I recognized the screenshot the moment she angled it toward me. Roy's Facebook page, plastered with an all-caps status. She left us with nothing. After everything we sacrificed. We are sick. Starving. Alone. Pray for us. Below it, 200 shares. Comments pouring in. So sad. Kids today have no loyalty. This is elder abuse. Ungrateful little brat, my hands went cold. Not from fear, just a drop in pressure. Like when a storm rolls in and your joints ache before the clouds arrive. Maya scrolled. It's going viral. Half of Mason's on his side. I took the phone from her gently. Read every word, every lie, every misremembered moment rebranded as sacrifice. Then I handed it back. He always said if you air dirty laundry, no one takes your side, I murmured. But I'm not airing laundry. Maya raised an eyebrow. You sure? I walked into the bedroom, pulled the worn shoebox from under the bed and set it on the desk. I'm showing the receipts. The next hour was silent, but not still. The tap of keyboard keys, the flick of file folders, the quiet rage of paper being laid bare. I opened my laptop, organized my tabs. Utility bills in my name, electric, water, gas, each with consistent payments, some going back 3 years. Screenshots of bank transfers for mortgage contributions. A PDF of the $1 $200 I'd sent when the furnace broke in 2021. Photos, too. Me on the roof replacing shingles, gloved and wind-chapped. Janice watching from the doorway, wine glass in hand. A list of home expenses I'd covered since 2018. Tires, groceries, medical copays. I took my time. This wasn't a takedown. It was a timeline. Maya leaned over once to refill my mug. You're not angry. I shook my head. No, I'm accurate. By late morning, I had the post ready. Not a word out of place. No insults, no blame. Just truth stitched together like the receipts they never thought I'd keep. When they asked me to leave, they didn't just lose a daughter. They lost the one who kept the lights on. I paused before hitting post, breathed in, let it settle, then tapped the button. For a few seconds, nothing. The cursor blinked in the silence. Then ping, ping, ping. I watched as the first likes came in, then shares, then private messages. A classmate I hadn't spoken to since junior year, I always wondered how you handled them. Respect. A neighbor saw you shoveling their driveway alone when you were 16. Never forgot that. A woman I didn't recognize. Thank you for saying what so many of us can't. The post was working its way through the same circles Roy had targeted, but instead of siding with him, some people paused, remembered. I glanced at Maya. She was watching me, not the screen. They're seeing it, she said softly. I leaned back in the chair, letting my shoulders settle. The tension that had sat beneath my ribs for weeks or maybe years unwound an inch. Not gone, but loosening. Let them read what they never saw, I said. Outside, the clouds hadn't lifted, but the light in the room felt different. The first thing I noticed at the autumn festival wasn't the smell of cinnamon or the sound of kids squealing near the bounce house. It was the silence between conversations, the half-second pause when people saw me. I stood beside Maya at the edge of the square, my hands stuffed in my jacket pockets, the air thick with wood smoke and the sweetness of caramel corn. The same festival I had attended for years. The same hay bales, same flannel shirts, same booth selling hand-knitted potholders. But something was different now, not loud, just changed. They're not avoiding you, Maya said, sipping from a small paper cup of cider. They're adjusting. Feels like avoidance, I muttered, watching a couple I knew from high school glance my way, then steer toward the kettle corn stand without waving. Give it a minute, she said. We started walking slowly, letting the noise and color swirl around us. The bounce house was still lopsided, sagging on the left side like it always did. Someone's golden retriever was dressed like a hot dog. I passed the booth where I'd once won second place for my apple pie. My ribbon had been pinned beside Janice's. She had gotten first. I remembered how she never looked up from her phone when they called my name. Near the baked goods table, I spotted Mrs. Langford, my old English teacher. She was shorter than I remembered, wrapped in a plaid shawl and holding a slice of pumpkin pie on a flimsy plate. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I expected her to look away like the others. Instead, she offered a small smile. "You deserved better, sweetheart," she said quietly, before turning toward the bandstand. I stood there for a second, unsure what to do with her words. Further along, we passed Mr. Collins from the hardware store. He nodded once. Not with pity, more like recognition. A quiet acknowledgement, the way someone nods when they see another person carry something heavy without complaint. Then I saw him. Roy stood near the cider booth, arms crossed, talking loudly to a small cluster of men. His voice cut through the music. She made it sound like we were leeches. We're her parents, for God's sake. All we ever did was give her a roof. The men shifted uncomfortably. One checked his watch. Another coughed and excused himself. No one nodded. No one clapped him on the back. Roy's voice rose, but it sounded smaller against the festival noise. I kept walking. A few feet away, Maya tilted her head toward a small group by the church bake sale. Two women whispered, one gesturing subtly in my direction. I caught a few words. She paid their bills. Always blamed her. Never even said thank you. I didn't stop. I didn't need to hear the rest. We passed the face painting station. Kids with spider webs and glittery pumpkins ran past us, laughter bubbling like it had nothing to do with anything. I envied their freedom, how little they had to unlearn. By the craft tent, a woman I didn't recognize, gray curls kind, eyes a laminated name tag reading, Joan, stepped into our path. She looked at Maya, then at me. "I'm on the church council," she said gently. We always suspected something wasn't right. But we didn't know how to speak on it. We should have. I nodded slowly. There was nothing to say, really. Her honesty was enough. Later, we stopped by the cider table where a volunteer handed us small cups and offered warm smiles without a trace of judgment. I sipped slowly, letting the tart heat settle in my throat. From across the square, I spotted Roy again now, by himself. His back was turned, and I could see the slope in his shoulders. He looked older. Not in the sympathetic way, just worn. Tired from holding up a version of himself that fewer and fewer people believed in. Near the fire pit, a man in a denim jacket stepped forward and gently touched my arm. His face was unfamiliar, but his eyes weren't. "You didn't imagine it," he said. "We saw it. We just didn't speak." Something tightened in my chest, then loosened again. The warmth from the cider wasn't just from the drink anymore. Maya and I found a bench beneath a tree, still stubbornly clinging to golden leaves. We sat in silence, watching the small town move around us. Some people looked, others didn't. But no one sneered. No one whispered loud enough for me to hear. The festival continued as it always had: hay rides, raffle tickets, toddlers sticky with frosting. But I wasn't the same, and neither, it seemed, were they. I looked across the square at the crowd faces, now shifting in my direction, less with suspicion and more with curiosity. Maybe empathy. Maybe something else. Maybe this silence means something different now. Maybe now it's mine. It was a Tuesday morning when the knock came. 2 soft raps measured. I opened the door to find a uniformed officer holding a manila envelope with my name typed neatly on the front. "Delaney Moran," he asked. I nodded. "You've been served." He handed over the envelope, nodded once more, then turned and walked back toward his cruiser without another word. The hallway outside my new apartment smelled faintly of fresh paint and someone's burnt toast. Back inside, I opened the packet with steady hands. The papers were thick, official, and ridiculous. Roy had filed a civil claim accusing me of financial abandonment and property interference. Janice's name was listed too, just below his. They were suing me. Maya sat across from me at the kitchen counter as I flipped through the pages, lips pressed into a thin line. "Well," she said, after a moment, "they really did it." "They said family doesn't sue family," I replied a little too calmly. "But they're not acting like family, and I'm not their bank anymore." That afternoon, I met with a legal advocate at the county courthouse. She had kind eyes, wiry gray hair pulled back in a bun, and a yellow legal pad she filled with quiet precision. "They filed under emotional abandonment," she said, tapping the papers. "That's not a recognized civil claim in this state. It's a play for sympathy." I laid out my folder, the receipts, the statements, the digital trail I'd curated with painful diligence. She read through it all, whistling softly. "You've got a solid countersuit here," she said. "You can pursue damages, or at least a formal statement of financial exploitation." "I don't want revenge," I told her. "I just want this to end." She nodded. "Then we'll make it clean." The courthouse was exactly what I remembered. pale walls, high ceilings, cold benches. I sat on one with my file folder on my lap, waiting for the mediation session to begin. Roy and Janice arrived 5 minutes late. Roy wore a suit that didn't quite fit anymore, his jaw tight with indignation. Janice looked smaller somehow, wrapped in a shawl despite the heated room eyes darting around like she was hoping to find an exit that didn't exist. They didn't speak to me. I didn't offer anything first. The mediator was polite and firm. She laid out the complaint, then asked if the plaintiff had supporting evidence. Roy launched into a monologue about betrayal, about ungrateful daughters, about being left to rot. Janice dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, murmuring something about being abandoned after all we did. The mediator listened, then turned to me. I slid my file across the table without a word. She flipped through it slowly. Utility payments, mortgage, contributions, repair, invoices, insurance policies, all in my name. When she got to the final page, she looked up and said, "This is quite thorough." Roy's face turned red. "She's twisting everything." The mediator raised a hand. "Sir, if you continue in that tone, I'll have to ask you to leave the room." The officer in the corner, a silent presence until now, straightened slightly. This could qualify as defamation. The mediator added her voice even. "If these documents are verified, continuing this suit may expose you to legal risk." Janice let out a low sob. "We didn't mean for it to go this far. We just want her to come home." I met her eyes. Home doesn't treat people like resources. There was nothing left to say after that. The session ended with a warning drop, the suit or face counteraction. They agreed to withdraw. No apologies, just a bitter nod and retreating footsteps. I walked out of the courthouse into crisp afternoon sun. The sky was the kind of pale blue that made everything feel slightly more possible. I drove back to my apartment, the windows cracked just enough to let the air in. It smelled like turning leaves and quiet. My place was still sparse hand-me-down furniture, mismatched dishes, but it was mine. The walls were painted soft blue, the kind of color you choose when you want to exhale and mean it. I pulled the small plastic cake topper from a drawer and set it on the shelf above my desk. The frosting was long gone, but the tiny figure still stood bent slightly, one edge cracked. A private trophy. Not for a birthday ruined, but for the girl who walked away anyway. That evening, I curled up on my thrifted couch with a blanket sipping tea and watching the light fade through half-open blinds. Maya had offered to come by, but I told her I needed the night to myself. She understood. Just as I was about to turn off the lamp, I noticed something on the floor by the front door. A small white envelope, no return address. I opened it carefully. Inside, a handwritten note in looping cursive. "You were never the problem. Some people just fear what they can't control." There was no signature, but I didn't need one. I sat back and let the quiet settle around me, not the silence of being ignored, but the kind that feels earned. They served me papers. I served them the facts. And now I whispered to the still room, this isn't an ending. It's a beginning with no permission required. They tried to erase me with silence and serve me blame disguised as love, but in the end, I found my voice where theirs had failed. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up, it's the first real act of choosing yourself. We don't always get the family we deserve, but we can choose the boundaries we need to heal. And when we do, peace begins where permission ends. If this story reminded you of a time you had to reclaim your worth, I'd love to hear your thoughts. To hear